The question is that the address be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Wills.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. First, I want to say a very heartfelt thank you to the people of Wills and to my campaign team, who gave me wonderful support throughout the election campaign and indeed in the months and the years leading up to it. It's a great honour to have such a strong level of support, and I am determined to work hard in this parliament to be a vigorous and forceful advocate for and representative of the people of Wills. During the election campaign, the claim was made that Labor had neglected the Wills electorate. This was without foundation, and so the House can get a better appreciation of the various programs and projects funded by the federal government. I list now some of the local press releases which I put out over the last 6 months. Applications for volunteer grants 2013 open. Wills unemployment falls again. $309,000 to enhance local settlement services. Funding to help local communities help the environment. Supporting people with mental illness and their carers in Wills. Local Sporting Champions program. Glenroy NGO in line for National Homelessness Awards. More than 57,000 local homes and businesses to be connected to the NBN. $99,000 to fix black spot in Wills. Hidden Creek Neighbourhood House supported by the Australian Government. Discover Wills Clean Energy Transformation. Applications open for next round of Digital Enterprise program. St Bernard's Primary School excels in special education. Funding to enhance social cohesion in Wills. Melbourne's North to provide food industry precinct base. $465,000 available for Moreland Council community infrastructure. NBN switched on for more homes and businesses in Brunswick. Merry Community Health Services to benefit from National Crime Prevention Fund. Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Cooperative receives funding boost. $215,000 clean technology grants for Wills food manufacturers. $77,000 clean technology grants for Broadmeadows and Coburg manufacturer. Funding for Renew Australia to continue creating opportunities for empty spaces. And $4,000 in grants and certificates for Wills Sporting Champions. The claim that Labor in government neglected the Wills electorate does not withstand real scrutiny. Deputy Speaker, the address in reply is no doubt the right time to pay my respects to the Governor-General, Her Excellency Quentin Bryce. I think she's done an outstanding job, and I sense that all Australians are proud of her, and through her, to Her Majesty the Queen. Recently I read a thorough and detailed book written by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. It's called Harmony. My copy was given to me by Dick Smith. Dick is an outstanding Australian who cares deeply for this country, and Dick's work on issues like population and Australian ownership is inspirational to me, and I know to many others. I absolutely commend Prince Charles' book, Harmony, to everyone who is interested in the future of our planet. The breadth of his knowledge is exceptional, and both the intellectual rigour and creative insight lying behind this book are deeply impressive. There's way too much about environment and population and food and architecture in it for me to do justice to it here. You'll have to read it for yourselves. But as two examples, let me cite first page 220, where he discusses academic studies which have found that contact with nature can make people more resilient to illness. One piece of research investigates the recovery rates of patients who had access to a view of trees in a Texas hospital courtyard compared with those whose window gave sight of only a concrete wall. All the patients had undergone the same gallbladder surgery, so were considered to be a broadly comparable group. Those patients who enjoyed a view of trees out of the window spent fewer days in hospital, they used fewer narcotic drugs, had fewer complications and registered fewer complaints with nurses responsible for their care. By contrast, people who could not see images of nature suffered increased depression, were in need of more pain relief and spent more time in recovery. So being exposed to the patterns produced by nature is directly necessary for our health. Prince Charles says the findings underline how harmony and connection with nature is not some vague or fringe concern, but has real benefits for people. The second example I draw to the House is on page 232, where he bemoans, quote, the modern trend towards more and more central planning. He says, Communities get what others decide for them. There are no alternatives on offer. A top-down approach to planning has been something of a partner of the industrial-scale copybook urban scheme. He says, it is driven by the brutal economics of growth and competitiveness and the pursuit of efficiency targets that care little as to whether a place ends up with soul. But Prince Charles believes that if people are empowered to work together, there are huge benefits. He says, the ability of people to self-organise can be a remarkably powerful force, but sadly it is an opportunity that is too often untapped. Centralised spatial planning devised by specialist planners trained in a 20th century mechanistic ideology sometimes misses fundamental choices and can lead communities in directions that are not in their best interests. I have enough experience now to know for sure that if people had been put more at the heart of the planning process, some of the disastrous urban environments created in many cities during the 20th century might easily have been avoided." Unquote. I personally think it incredibly important that local residents get to determine what kind of street, neighbourhood, community that they live in. And I will provide some free political advice to any of the new MPs in this place who've decided that Parliament's all right and that they'd prefer a lengthy parliamentary career to a brief one. Back local residents, not property developers. I repeat, support local residents, not property developers. Deputy Speaker, I was not a candidate for the opposition frontbench. I was a shadow minister for 10 years prior to 2007. I've been there and done that. It's my experience that being a shadow minister brings with it obligations not to speak outside your portfolio and to have everything you do say cleared and approved by the Leader of the Opposition's office. For me, these limitations are simply too great in a world and an Australia which I believe is facing massive challenges. The world is being damaged, perhaps irreparably, by rapid population growth, climate change, unchecked rainforest and other habitat destruction, poverty, war and terrorism. Australia is not immune from these challenges. Many of our unique and beautiful birds, plants and animals are on the brink of extinction. Our young people can't afford to buy a home of their own and their jobs are insecure, while pensioners and retirees battle rapidly rising electricity, gas and water bills and council rates. I need to be able to speak out about these things, and I intend to. Anyone who thinks that my decision to return to the backbench means that I'm looking to lead a quiet life and slip out the back door is very mistaken. On the contrary, it is a necessary precondition for being active in the debate about the issues which are of greatest importance to the world and to this country. I, and every other post-war baby boomer, can count myself incredibly lucky to be born when I was, because the opportunities that my generation had, job and career opportunities, housing opportunity, free education, our children don't have them. For all the hype about growth and progress and development building a better world, it isn't. It is tougher for our kids than it ever was for us. This is not just true for Australia, it is true in many other countries as well. It is heartbreaking to hear those stories of all the African migrants who drowned off the coast of the Mediterranean island of Lampedusa. Terrible, terrible, terrible. There is a response that says we should tackle this problem by dismantling our borders and allowing people to live wherever they want to live. But anyone who has seen the Gumballs video by Roy Beck of Numbers USA, and if you haven't, I can't recommend it too highly, will know that there are 2 billion people in the world living on $2 a day or less, and that their numbers are increasing by 80 million every year. No nation in the world, not the United States, not Europe, not Australia, can cope with such numbers. There are 2 causes of mass migration. One is people fleeing political violence and repression. The other driver is poverty and people wanting a better life. In those countries which are beset by political violence, the most common cause is religious fundamentalism. There is religious violence, oppression of minorities, not enough respect for the rights of women, not enough separation between religion and politics, between church and state. This needs to be called out. It is a task for all of us, from whatever religious or ethnic background we come, to condemn, to denounce to shun, to treat as outcasts religious leaders who preach hate and violence. It has to be called for what it is. Until political and religious violence stops, there will be people fleeing it. And in the other motive for getting on board a boat, the search for a better life, again, we all have a role to play. We should lift our foreign aid budget to 0.7% of GDP. We should not cut our aid by $4.5 billion over the forward estimates, as the Liberal government is doing. It is claimed there is a budget emergency and we can't afford this aid. Then why is the defence budget to be increased? The target of 2% of GDP spending on defence is quite arbitrary and absolute nonsense. Spending money on aid builds goodwill with our neighbours and makes us more secure. I've seen it with my own eyes. People in Indonesian villages like us. In stark contrast, spending money on more powerful weapons just makes our neighbours suspicious and sets in place a vicious circle of arms race, fear and mistrust. So why isn't there more debate about how Australia's rapid population growth is making it harder for our young people than it was for us? After considerable reflection, I've come to the conclusion that population is not unique in this regard. It's one of a number of issues, not the only one, but one of a number of issues which are considered threatening to the economic interests of the wealthiest and most powerful Australians, and in some cases non-Australians, who exercise great influence on our political debate through their direct and indirect media influence. There are political issues which contain no germ of threat to corporate wealth. Same-sex marriage, asylum seekers, the Republic, politicians' entitlements. These things occupy endless column inches and airtime. If they distract and divide us, then so much the better. But issues which have the potential to impact on the wealth of the wealthy, executive salaries, trade practices and market concentration, foreign ownership, threats to the environment from industry and agriculture, and yes, population growth and migration, these issues are constantly overlooked and repressed. In this, we don't get any help from quite a few people who think of themselves as progressive and who would look you in the eye and swear black and blue that they want to save the environment, they want to protect workers, that they care about the future. But whether it is from fear of being called racist or xenophobic, or a form of moral conceit or vanity, they will not touch the issue of population. That is, of course, their right, but let me make this point to such people as bluntly as I can. For as long as Australia's rapid population growth, high migration path endures, it will destroy the things you claim to hold dear. It creates a surplus pool of labour which is used as a battering ram against job security and against workers' pay and conditions. It prevents us attaining full employment and the quest for jobs for our increasing workforce leads us to sacrifice our environmental standards, destroy wildlife habitat and compromise our quality and way of life.
Order. The debate is interrupted in accordance with Standing Order 43. The debate may be resumed at a later hour and the honourable member will have leave to continue speaking when the debate is resumed. The question is that the address be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Wills in continuation.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In my view, honourable defeat is overrated. In my view, there is little honour in avoidable failure. In my view, those who want to save the environment, who want to help workers, who care about the future, have a responsibility to succeed. Honour comes from success, from solving problems, from being able to proudly hand the baton over to the next generation. In political debate, people are very frightened about being called racist or xenophobic. This is true of Prime Ministers and it's true of ordinary people. Yes, there are racists out there. It is a pity, it is true. But the use of the term racism has become a new kind of McCarthyism, used to stifle debate. And let me point out, in response to the allegation of racism or xenophobia against people who want to contest our rapid population growth, first, that Australia is already a multiracial society. 1/4 born overseas, 1/2 with one or both parents born overseas. The bird has flown. No one is trying to maintain Australia as a white Anglo-Saxon outpost of the British Empire. It can't be done, and I haven't come across anyone who's trying. Secondly, stopping rapid population growth will assist Australians of all backgrounds. For example, Broadmeadows has high unemployment. Many unemployed people in Broadmeadows are of Turkish background. They are entitled to our consideration rather than running migrant worker programs that wreck their ability to find work. And third, if talking about population makes you a racist, you're in pretty good company. People don't usually think of Dr. Martin Luther King as a white supremacist. What did he have to say about population? I quote, "Family planning to relate population to world resources is possible, practical and necessary. Unlike plagues of the Dark Ages or contemporary diseases we do not yet understand, the modern plague of overpopulation is solvable by means we have discovered and with resources we possess. What is lacking is not sufficient knowledge of the solution, but universal consciousness of the gravity of the problem and education of billions who are its victims," unquote. And people wouldn't ordinarily think of David Suzuki as a puppet or fellow traveller of Pauline Hanson. What did he have to say about population? Dr. Suzuki said, "Of course, human numbers are at the very core of our crisis. The explosive rate of growth simply can't continue." And while we're at it, I'll point out a couple more. Former US President Bill Clinton told the United Nations in 1993 that to ensure a healthier and more abundant world, we simply must slow the world's explosive growth in population. And his Vice President, Al Gore, said, quote, "I consider the dramatic growth in the world's population to be the greatest challenge currently facing the environment." He said the effects of this rapid increase are felt around the globe. It is ironic in the extreme that we have a couple of agents provocateurs out there accusing people who talk about population of trying to hijack the environmental movement, when in fact they are the most fair dinkum environmentalists you'll find. I defy anyone to challenge the environmental credentials of Jacques Cousteau, who has devoted his entire life to marine conservation, who said, "Population growth is the primary source of environmental damage." I defy anyone to challenge the environmental credentials of Captain Paul Watson, the founder of Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, who spent his life risking injury and imprisonment to harass Japanese whalers. He says, and I quote, "The accusation that a stand to reduce immigration is racist is music to the ears to those who profit from the cheap labour of immigrants. They are the same people who love to see environmentalists make fools of themselves, and there is no environmentalist more foolish than one who refuses to confront the fact that uncontrolled human population growth is the #1 cause of the world's increasing environmental problems," unquote. And does anyone think Sir David Attenborough, with a lifetime behind him of educating and advocating for the protection of our rainforests and other wilderness areas, a bogus environmentalist? David Attenborough has described global population increase as frightening and said, "I've seen wildlife under mounting human pressure all over the world, and it's not just from human economy or technology. Behind every threat is the frightening explosion in human numbers." He said, "I've never seen a problem that wouldn't be easier to solve with fewer people or harder and ultimately impossible with more." So, Deputy Speaker, what am I going to do about it? I'm going to set up an NGO, an incorporated association, to pursue the cause. It will have a token membership fee and will not be a competitor organisation for Sustainable Population Australia or the Environment NGOs. It won't be a political party. I'm in one of those already. It won't try to have a policy on everything. It will try to avoid the divide and distract traps that I talked about earlier. And it will try to set out a coherent, superior alternative to the path that we are on. I'm going to launch it soon. It'll be limited to Victoria, which may disappoint some in a national audience, but you've got to start somewhere. I may be able to work up associate membership for interstaters. The great 19th century philosopher John Stuart Mill said, "Solitude, in the sense of being often alone, is essential to any depth of meditation or of character. And solitude in the presence of natural beauty and grandeur is the cradle of thoughts and aspirations which are not only good for the individual, but which society could ill do without. Nor is there much satisfaction in contemplating the world with nothing left to the spontaneous activity of nature, every hedgerow or superfluous tree rooted out, and scarcely a place left where a wild shrub or flower could grow without being eradicated as a weed in the name of improved agriculture. I hope people will join my NGO and help me build it into a large movement of citizens dedicated to passing on to our children and our grandchildren a world in as good a condition as the one our parents and grandparents left to us. Because, Deputy Speaker, population is not about race, it is about stewardship.